Right now, you've probably heard that your body is filled with tiny plastic particles, microplastics, supposedly damaging your brain, clogging your arteries, and slowly killing you. You've seen the headlines: microplastics found in human hearts, in brains, linked to strokes and heart attacks. Governments are announcing funding. Scientists are raising alarms. It all sounds terrifying. But here's the part you're not hearing. A growing number of experts are now questioning whether much of this panic is based on flawed science. Let's start with what's actually true. Plastic pollution is real. Microplastics, tiny particles between 1 micrometer and 5 millimeters, are everywhere. They're in oceans, soil, air, and even food. That's not controversial. What is controversial is the recent claim that these particles are building up inside the human body and causing serious disease. Around 2022 and 2023, studies began claiming microplastics had been found in human blood, organs, and even the brain. These findings spread. Headlines turned them into something more alarming, not just that plastics are around us, but that they're inside us and harming us. One study even linked microplastics in arterial plaque to increased risk of heart attack and stroke. That pushed the narrative from concern to fear. But recently, that narrative has started to crack. Analytical chemists, experts in detecting tiny substances, have raised serious concerns about how these studies were done. Their argument is simple. The methods used may not actually be detecting microplastics reliably. In some cases, researchers heated human tissue samples to very high temperatures and then analyzed what remained. But when human fat breaks down under heat, it can create particles that resemble microplastics. That means what's being detected might not be plastic at all. There's another issue: contamination. Microplastics are everywhere, including in labs. They're in the air, on clothing, and in lab equipment. Without extremely strict controls, it's very easy for samples to become contaminated during collection or analysis. Several experts reviewing these studies have said the same thing. Many lacked proper contamination controls and validated methods. In other words, they may not be measuring what they think they're measuring. The European Food Safety Authority conducted a literature review in 2024 and found that almost all published microplastic and nanoplastic studies were littered with mistakes, poor methodologies, and unjustified conclusions. But this review was ignored by the media because it didn't fit the narrative. Alarm sells! Fear generates clicks. And by the time skeptical scientists started speaking up, the damage was done. The public believed the threat was real. Now let's talk about one of the most viral claims, that people ingest about 5 grams of microplastics per week, the equivalent of a credit card. That statistic spread everywhere. But later analysis showed the calculation behind it was likely incorrect by a large margin. The real estimate appears to be dramatically lower. But by then, the damage was done. The headline stuck. This highlights a bigger issue: how science gets communicated. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The timing is incredibly suspicious. Just as scientists are exposing the methodological fraud in microplastics research, the government announces massive funding and regulatory action. This is a pattern we've seen before. Create a health panic with questionable science. Generate public pressure. Then swoop in with government programs, regulations, and funding that benefit specific industries, activists, and political interests. Let me be clear. Plastic pollution is a real environmental problem. We produce too much plastic. We don't recycle it effectively. It accumulates in ecosystems and harms wildlife. These are legitimate concerns. But the leap from plastic pollution is bad for the environment to microplastics in your body are causing heart attacks and brain damage is not supported by credible evidence. Most of the studies making these claims are methodologically flawed, potentially contaminated, and have not been replicated using rigorous techniques. The current scientific consensus, according to the European Food Safety Authority and numerous analytical chemistry experts, is that we don't actually know if microplastics in human tissues are real, how much is present, or whether they cause harm. The detection methods are unreliable. The studies are inconsistent. The biological mechanisms are speculative. We're in a situation where alarm has far outpaced evidence. Here's what we actually know. Most microplastics you ingest are excreted. Your body doesn't absorb them. They pass through your digestive system and come out. A tiny fraction, depending on particle size, might be absorbed across the intestinal barrier, but there's no clear evidence that this causes harm. In vitro studies, which are lab experiments on cells, not real human bodies, have shown that extremely high concentrations of microplastics can cause cellular stress. But these concentrations are magnitudes higher than what humans are ever exposed to. It's the equivalent of drowning cells in plastic and then claiming this proves plastic is toxic at normal exposure levels. Animal studies have shown that very high doses of microplastics can cause inflammation and tissue damage. But again, these doses are unrealistic for human exposure. And animal studies often don't translate to humans. There are no long-term human health studies showing causation between microplastic exposure and disease. The studies claiming to find associations are observational, riddled with confounding factors, and based on the flawed detection methods I've already described. So what should you actually do? There's no need for panic, but reasonable precautions make sense. If you want to reduce exposure, use glass or stainless steel instead of plastic when possible. Avoid heating food in plastic containers. Limit contact between hot food and plastic. These are simple steps, not extreme measures. At the same time, it's worth keeping perspective. Plastic pollution is a real environmental issue. It affects ecosystems and wildlife in well-documented ways. But the leap from environmental concern to claims of widespread human health damage is still being studied and remains uncertain. So instead of reacting to headlines, focus on evidence. Science is a process. It evolves. Early findings get challenged. Better methods replace weaker ones. That's how real understanding develops. Right now, when it comes to microplastics and human health, we're still in that process. So stay informed. Stay skeptical of sensational claims on all sides. And remember, uncertainty doesn't mean danger, but it also doesn't mean safety. It just means we don't have all the answers yet. And that's where the real story is.